All right, so let's talk more about Typhoon Gaemi now with Matthew Cappucci, who joins us live from Washington, D.C. He's a storm chaser and meteorologist. Welcome to the News Hour. Matthew, just how surprising is Typhoon Gaemi's strength and devastation for you?
Well, I think the strength is impressive in and of itself, but one really interesting thing that kind of got my attention was the little loop-de-loop it did near the northeast coast of Taiwan, which prolonged its impact. It scraped along the coast for a long time. Part of the reason, you had winds flowing into the storm, blowing over the high terrain with mountains over 3,000 meters in northern Taiwan. What that did is that when the air entering the storm went down those mountains, it stretched vertically, it sunk a little bit, it warmed up, and it acquired more spin. And that helped the storm to kind of be tugged south and make that weird loop-de-loop. So in addition to causing Category 3 equivalent impacts with winds gusting upwards of 180 kilometers per hour, you had that impact over 4, 5, 6 hours. Then it moved ashore, dumped rainfall, and now it's making landfall again in China near Fuzhou and causing flooding along the Mir River.
What are you expecting it to do in China? Are you expecting to see the devastation it caused in Taiwan and also the Philippines?
Well, the good news, if there is any good news, is that the winds have come down quite a bit. I want you to think of an ice skater spinning. When they stretch their arms a little bit, the winds affect a broader area, but they kind of slow down that spin a little bit. Same thing here. The winds have a big footprint across China, but now we're seeing gusts of maybe 80 kilometers per hour, which is way less than what it was. But the storm is just dumping all of its rainfall, unloading that rainfall. And it comes at a time of year when China's already dealing with flooding. They have something called a Mayu front, essentially a stalled frontal boundary draped across China that leads to flooding in the summertime. Add that atop this tropical cyclone now, and it's easy to see why places along the Mir River that have seen all this rain recently could overflow their banks.
So we know that this was the strongest typhoon to hit Taiwan in 8 years, and people are possibly asking, of course asking actually, why? What is the cause?
Well, we do tend to see tropical cyclones this time of year pretty much every year somewhere in the Western Pacific. Unfortunately, this year, the steering currents were such that it could be easily shifted towards and easily steered towards Taiwan. So we do get them. It is rather typical. That said, sometimes we're prone to see more rapid intensification thanks to warming ocean waters commensurate with climate change. In this case, the storm jumped from a Category 1 equivalent to a Category 4 in just 18 hours. Realistically, though, we're actually expecting the Pacific to be a little quieter than average this year, whereas the Atlantic will likely have a very busy hurricane season, if not a hyperactive one. So we do get storms this time of year every year. They just happen to be extra unlucky this time around. And I guess if there was any saving grace, it's that the storm weakened a little bit before it moved ashore, thanks to that weird loop-de-loop it traced.
Matthew, Typhoon Gaemi has killed people. The images we've seen are incredible. How can governments prepare? How can people prepare, if at all?
Anytime we're talking about a strong storm like this making landfall, I tell folks to run from the water, hide from the wind. And when we say run from the water, we mean not only coastal storm surge, but inland freshwater flooding too. Oftentimes with tropical cyclones, we might see 5, 6, 7 centimeters worth of rain in a single hour's time, and that might last 6, 12, 18 hours. So you can really get some high-end flooding, especially in the higher terrain where mountains focus that rainfall. Unfortunately, in Taiwan, the bulk of the impacts we saw were tied to freshwater flooding. The infrastructure there can withstand wind. Taiwan does a really good job of protecting against wind, but when it comes to flooding, that's something that's really tough to sort of harden your infrastructure against. So anytime folks are getting ready to be hit by a hurricane or a tropical storm or a typhoon, we tell them make sure that if they're in a floodplain, move to some place that is higher ground, not susceptible to mudslides, and hopefully a place where if one route is washed out, they can get out another way.
Matthew, fantastic to have you on the News Now. Thank you so much for joining us here on TRT World. Matthew Cappucci speaking to us from Washington, a storm chaser and meteorologist. Thank you.